Welcome to Geopolitical Outcomes. My name is Tom, and as a former U.S. intelligence officer and master's in international affairs, my intent is to leverage my training and experience to provide an informed analysis on geopolitics and world affairs. In today's episode, we'll discuss the United Kingdom's surrender of the British Indian Ocean Territory, also known as the Chagos Islands, to Mauritius. An event that got little coverage in the international media, but whose impact will be far and wide-reaching and be felt in the years to come. The British Indian Ocean Territory, also known as the Chagos Islands, is a vast area consisting of 1,000 islands and shoals, 54,000 square miles of territory, and a staggering 247 square mile economic exclusion zone. Except for the joint British and American naval base on the island of Diego Garcia, the entire area is uninhabited. It makes up the world's largest marine preserve. The base itself is perhaps one of the most strategically important bases in the entire British and American militaries. Located in an isolated part of the southern Indian Ocean, it provides the American and British alliance network with the ability to strike anywhere in the Indian Ocean Basin from a position of relative security. This capacity not only benefits America and our allies, but also global trade as it helps enforce stability in an area critical for the trade and transport of fossil fuels. However, Britain signed a deal this past May to hand over the entire territory to Mauritius. And while the deal promises to allow the British and Americans to continue to operate the base, Britain will go from landlord to tenant and pay Mauritius an estimated £35 billion over time to do so. So essentially, Britain is paying Mauritius billions to give away a valuable piece of territory, a questionable action considering the flat economic growth the UK is currently facing. The deal itself is problematic, as Mauritius is a weak and potentially corruptible country. While some reports state that Mauritius intends to maintain the marine protected area status and the 24-mile exclusion zone for the base under their jurisdiction, I just don't trust it. For example, Mauritius sued for fishing rights to the area in 2016. And so what if they slowly begin to violate the treaty and allow their own fishing boats to fish in the protected area? Then what can Britain do? Will they take it back? That would be much harder to do. Mauritius also has strong ties to both China and India, who both have strong strategic interests in the area. Mauritius agreed not to allow other countries to establish a base in the area. But what about a Chinese weather research station, complete with weather radars that can also serve a military purpose? Will Chinese fishing trawlers begin to plunder the once protected fisheries of this area? And with them, will surveillance boats, disguised as fishing trawlers, conduct gray zone operations against the base? Under such circumstances, the islands could easily begin to look like the Horn of Africa or the South China Sea, where regional and global powers surveil and compete with each other over dominance. Even if one were to give Mauritius the benefit of the doubt that they would intend to uphold their agreements, as a poor country, they would struggle to effectively police an area so vast, located 1,300 nautical miles away from Mauritius itself. It would seem that this handover will likely destabilize both the geopolitical and environmental state of this territory. So then why did the UK agree to such a bad deal? Well, the short answer is they were guilt-tripped into doing it. In 2019, the UK lost two successive rulings, first in the International Court of Justice, and the other in the UN General Assembly. Both were essentially a gang-up of the non-alignment nations due to the strength of the anti-colonial woke narratives within political circles. In 2019, most of the UK's Western allies abstained from voting. Essentially, the claim was that back in the 1960s, when Britain granted Mauritius independence, they should have also given the Chagos Islands to them as well, as it was part of the Greater Mauritius colony, even though the newly formed country would have struggled to efficiently manage such a distant and vast maritime territory. The UN General Assembly stated that Britain should hand over the territory to complete the so-called decolonization of the Chagos Islands. Both rulings lacked enforcement mechanisms, yet British liberals felt morally compelled to comply. This was initially prevented by H.R. McMaster of the first Trump administration. However, under the second Trump administration, Keir Starmer and the Labour government finally got its way and gave away the vast territory and billions of pounds to Mauritius. On the surface, the handover of the British Indian Ocean Territory to Mauritius seems puzzling, almost illogical, which begs the question, is there more to play behind the scenes than meets the eye? It's worth noting regarding the barristers and lobbyists who represented Mauritius in their successful litigations against the UK, that they were not Mauritian lawyers, but rather they were London-based lawyers and law firms specializing in these kind of cases. In similar disputes, such humanitarian law specialists have faced accusations of being indirectly funded by NGOs, organizations that may themselves be influenced by actors such as the Chinese Communist Party, Russia, or even powerful private interests. This would not be unprecedented. For years, hostile states have sought to exploit the openness of Western societies using NGOs and advocacy networks as instruments to erode the Western-led global order. Whether that is precisely what happened in this case, I cannot say, but the possibility should not be dismissed. These London-based humanitarian lawyers operate much like mercenaries, advancing legal arguments that, while cloaked in the rhetoric of justice and human rights, may produce far-reaching geopolitical consequences that undermine their own country. They wrap themselves in the language of moral virtue, claiming to defend the weak and advance global good, while profiting handsomely and gaining fame from high-profile cases whose funding sources remain opaque and whose geopolitical beneficiaries may not align with the West's long-term stability. For example, the United Nations website attempts to justify the ruling against the UK in the International Court of Justice using terms such as consistent with the right of peoples to self-determination and protection of the human rights of those concerned. Meanwhile, the islands are uninhabited, and the majority of the descendants of the 1,000 or so Chagos Islanders who were vacated from the island in the 1960s now live in the UK. And they actually protested the handover, as many of them were treated poorly by the government of Mauritius before emigrating to the UK, and wished only to return as British citizens living in the British Indian Ocean Territory. Yet somehow these humanitarian lawyers were able to ignore this inconvenient detail since they were being paid by Mauritius. Inevitably, this industry seeps into the political sphere as well, influencing liberal politicians, many of them lawyers themselves, such as Prime Minister Keir Starmer, who came from this very ecosystem. Who then truly benefits from this handover? It may not be one actor, but several. Under British administration, the territory was secure as the world's largest marine protected area. Now, under Mauritian control, the vast waters, islands, and seabed may be open for fishing rights, fossil fuel exploration, deep sea mining, even commercial tourism and housing. What was once a global environmental safeguard may now soon become a contested commercial frontier. Therefore, it is not merely a question of sovereignty, it represents both a geopolitical setback, weakening stability in the Indo-Pacific, and an environmental one, threatening the world's most pristine of marine ecosystems. In conclusion, by agreeing to the transfer of sovereignty while leasing back Diego Garcia, the UK is trading a durable position for short-term woke optics. The price is real. Financial, environmental, and strategic, and the risks compound. This leaves more room for outside influence and more uncertainty over long-term stewardship of a critical maritime location. One can say this is not statecraft. Instead, it's an unnecessary downgrade of Britain's strategic position sold as progress, and the impacts of this decision will be felt in the days to come. As the saying goes, weak men make hard times. But what do you guys think? Was Britain's surrender of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius a good idea? Please let me know what you think below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.